Stanford University.
First of all, I really want to focus in on a few things, and I'll cover in my presentation. First, on measurements and details, why it matters, what's important to measure, what's not important to measure, particularly if you're going to start a company. There are a lot of popular slogans that we use in the venture capital world. Lots of things you might have learned in B school or are learning in B school. Lots of things other entrepreneurs may have told you. But starting a company has its own unique set of strategies that may be contrary to the popular slogans that you hear today. I'm going to go through a list of those, say here's the ones that you should pay attention to, here's the ones you should avoid, and these are the things that you really, really need to focus in on. First, let's start with a pop quiz just to make sure everybody's awake. So, when starting a business, which is the most important thing to remember? A, be laser focused. B, develop a detailed plan and stick to it. Raise lots of money and then raise lots more money. Hire only A players. E, all of the above. That one's supposed to be F, but you know it's PowerPoint. None of the above. So write down your answers right now, what you think it is. Put it aside. I'm going to go through this presentation, and then at the very end I can reveal at least what my opinion is the appropriate answer when starting a business. Okay? First one is when you start a business, there are lots of reasons to start a business. Number one reason to start a business is I can't get a job elsewhere or I just got fired. It's true. If you ask people why do they start a business, particularly small business, it's like I couldn't get a job elsewhere, didn't like my job. The laundry list is long. But if you're serious about starting a business, it really is at the same level of going to war. You're either going to conquer new lands, displace competitors, you're going to be outgunned and outmanned, particularly if you're going up against entrenched opponents. In the beginning, you can kind of operate below the radar, but if you're anywhere successful, you become a threat. You can use that threat to your advantage, or you can use it to your disadvantage and allow somebody else to win the war. Sun Tzu said, you know, it's not just a question of numbers. If it was simply who has the biggest army, or in business, who has the most money, you ever heard the thing, oh, we're not going to invest in that, you know, because Google's going to do that. Now, Microsoft's already working on that particular project, right? Or, you know, Apple owns that particular market. You know, it goes on and on and on and on. If it was easy as that, you never have to go to war. You just look up who has the most assets and decide they're going to be the winner. That's not the case. Some believe who has the sharpest knife, who has the biggest gun, who has the sharpest sword. You know, again, then it'd be pretty easy to look up, you know, to go to Jane's book of fighting ships, see who has the best weapons out there. Same thing in business, particularly technology companies, who has the best technology. Those things help. They don't define the winning condition. The winning condition, is, Sun Tzu said, is based on science. And what he meant was the science of warfare, which is strategy and tactics. That's evolved over a period of time. There are some other concepts I want to integrate into that. But if you bring these kind of what I call battlefield tactics into thinking about how to start your business and how to position yourself for success, your probability of victory goes way up. Don't start a business unless you want to win. Right? There are a lot of lifestyle businesses. That's great. Don't go to venture capital. We're not interested in that. Call your mom, put your house down for a second mortgage, do all those kinds of things. Be happy, make your money. Dealing with venture capitalists, people like myself, is a royal pain, right? Because our job is to go in and push you to your failure point and push you to your edge. And sometimes it's extremely uncomfortable. But if you want to win, just like in sports, in the art of war, or in business, it is about outperforming your competition. That means figuring out where is your edge, and then for you to figure out, by being a leader, what is the edge of all your people, your organization, your technology, and your science. So I want to talk about decision making, what details do matter, what details don't matter, what matters. I want to dispel some conventional wisdom and give you some final thoughts, and then we can break into our projects. So decision making. Lots of decisions are being made every single day in startups. A lot of them involve the entrepreneur. In fact, most of them involve the entrepreneur. In many cases, the entrepreneur becomes over-involved in decision-making because they're trying to make decisions where it really doesn't matter at the moment in time what the outcome of those decisions are. But along the way, there are certain key decisions that are defining. We'll talk about those. And so there are two ways you can go about making decisions: opinion-driven or data-driven. There's a role for both, but I would say if you can get it, get the data. Most opinions are granted in the past. Experts have a role, but experts never define to break through new strategies. We tried that, didn't work before. I'm an expert. There's no way your idea can actually be pulled off. We've seen this before. It's a very difficult situation when you stand in front of an expert, because the expert is granted by all the things that made her successful in the past, which may or may not affect you or be anything with what you're doing. The reason for that is what you're trying to be is a disruptive force in the market. You're going to try to pull off, particularly if you want to build that billion-dollar opportunity, something that has never been pulled off before. And in most cases, the idea that starts a company, the crazier the idea, the bigger the output and the outcome. Decisions informed by vision. We'll talk a little bit about that. One of the things you can always test between a good decision and a bad decision is in the early stages, if you make a decision, if your options increase, it was a good decision. If your options decrease for future decisions, you're probably heading down the wrong path. Optionality is a fundamental principle of a startup, because you don't know what the road ahead looks like. It's a very foggy path. If it was clear to you, it's probably clear to everybody else, and it's probably saturated with companies, saturated with entrepreneurs. Probability of victory goes down. Biggest problem most entrepreneurs have is not asking the right question in the first place. Then the rest of these, which we'll talk about later on, are all important. One of the key parts about decision making is figuring out on any particular day, what is the key decision I have to make today? That's the only way to unload yourself. If you try to make every decision every single day, you will not build a company. So here's some key rules of measurement. What is measurement? Measurement is about the ability for you to create useful data to help you in decision making. Measurement drives behavior. If you don't measure it, you're probably not going to be able to either affect somebody else's behavior, principally your employees, or even yourself. Data should be driving decision making. A big mistake most entrepreneurs make is they only focus on themselves. There's this great case study, if you haven't taken it, it's the Frito-Lay case study with the handheld computer. You know those Frito-Lay trucks that drive around, and the guys who kind of loads up the trucks and puts the potato chips up, right? They have this little handheld computer that they've been carrying around for about 20 years now that's hooked up to that truck. And in that handheld computer, they log in how well their potato chips are doing. But what's even better is they log what their competitor chips are doing at that same stand. So what was happening was Frito-Lay had better data on Procter & Gamble than Procter & Gamble had on their own chips. They got their data on how well Pringles were selling against Fritos before P&G, when they were test marketing, completed their tests. Right? So measure your competition as well as measure yourself, so you don't stare at your belly button. One of the problems about sometimes measurements, particularly among customers, is you spend all your time in the beginning measuring the customer you got. Right? So you optimize and try to improve this over a period of time based on feedback of what that customer has. What you really should be concerned about is the other guy's customers, particularly if you're trying to penetrate the other guy's market space. Stare at this too long, you stare at these little anthills. You better understand, particularly if you're trying to displace a competitor, where the mountain is. Understand you battle space? Data drives knowledge. Knowledge drives advantage. Superior situational awareness. Situational awareness is the understanding of your environment, what's happening around you. The further out you can understand beyond what your competitor understands, puts you in the victory position. Let's talk about OODA loops. There was this colonel who always had this competition in Korea. He used to fly the F-86. And he said, from any position, you can start from behind me, in front of me, atop of me, below me, in 45 seconds, I will beat you in that dogfight. And OODA, which stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act, is about lots of small maneuvers that gains angles on your competitor. So if two planes are passing on left, it's all about a turning fight. At the end of each turn, you want to gain a few angles on your competition. Now, a big mistake a lot of companies make, even in the history of warfare, is they're always looking for the decisive decision. They're looking for that decisive move. That one, if I just do that Tom Cruise move, like in Top Gun, I'm going to get the guy. That's not real life. And in running your business, it's about gaining angles on your competition. Let's talk about that. The principle of OODA is, if I can make quicker decisions based on my observation than my opponent, I will always gain angles. And after a number of turns, since there's only 360 degrees in the circle, I will eventually win the fight. The slower decision-making process, your inability to keep up with your competitor's ability to observe, orient, decide, and act, puts you in a disadvantage. In the Clinton versus Bush election, Clinton outgunned Bush because his team had data collection systems where he was getting polling data within 2 hours of any news that was breaking. Took Bush almost a half a day. He could outmaneuver, outgun whatever came down the pipe. The same thing is true in business. If you can check sex, look what your competitors are doing, look at your marketplace, collect your data, measure your data. Great company data management and observation is Zynga, right? Because they measure everything. And as soon as you can then turn your business, in Zynga's case, they do this thing called A/B testing in their games. You know, they put out the red wagon, they put out the green wagon to see which one is taking up faster. They immediately change whatever's taking up faster. That becomes the predominant one. They throw away the green wagon, go with the red wagon. They decide to act, and they stick with it. If it starts failing, they react, reorient, and start all over again. So, in programming, anybody here an engineer programming? Does anyone program? Great. You guys heard of spiral development, right? Which is kind of these sessions where you set up your objectives, very short objectives, typically a week or less, right? Here's my objectives. Everybody pulls off what their goals are. They go off to try to accomplish the task. At the end of the week, they look at it. Whatever is done gets into the next release cycle. Basically, it's code and fix. Code and fix. And they keep doing it over and over and over and over again. Why does that work? Why does OODA work in a business? Whereas traditional business strategies develop in a waterfall. Let's do a big business plan. The master plan. The 200-page plan that has all the alternatives and all of the things that we're going to do from beginning to end. Sort of like a bridge too far, right? And what happens the moment somebody throws a wrench into the plan, everything falls apart. There's no agility in that style of business strategy development. Agility is knowing what your goal is, the long-term vision, you're vision-driven. And when I say vision long-term, I'm talking 3, 4, 5 years. With lots of little objectives along the way that you tune your business to by looking, observing, acting, measuring, doing it all over again. Constantly gaining angles on your competition. Develop a vision of the future. Start with that vision, that 3 to 5 years. What do you want to be when you grow up? I always say, imagine yourself being interviewed by Forbes magazine, with the exception of Ernestine. Most of you guys won't get interviewed until after you make $1 billion, right? Imagine what is going to take place in that interview, the questions they're going to ask. You know, typical questions like, at what point did you see the product revolutionizing the world? What's that product look like? How do people use that product? Why is it a household name? What was your 4 or 5 key decisions that helped build this company? The clearer your vision of what the future will be, or what you want it to be, gives you the basis to shape your decisions to drive to that future. Futures are created. They don't create you. Check your strategy. Develop, check your strategy. Select what marketplaces you want to fight in. When you're a startup, don't pick a fight with a big company. Be ready to get slaughtered. When the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and they had a huge advantage over the US, the US had to have a strategy that says, okay, we're outgunned, our ships are sunk, how do we do it? So they did guerrilla warfare. They went in, did a little attack, ran away. Attack and run, attack and run, attack and run, attack and run. Starting the business, the same thing. Fly underneath the radar. A big mistake entrepreneurs make, because it's all in this race to be on the web and being covered by all the tech journals, because it's good for my ego, I can get to brag about it at Y Combinator or any one of these other places, is standing yourself up and making yourself a target before you're ready to go to market. Right? Stay in stealth until you're ready for the fight. Test your assumptions. Select battlegrounds in which you can win. Understand your competitors. Generate your tactics to fight that competitor in the space that you want to fight. And in business, we do that. Our skirmishes is about winning lighthouse customers. Can I steal a customer away from somebody else? Can I get a customer to do something new that has never done this kind of thing before? It's one customer at a time. It doesn't matter if you're a web company, an iPhone company, an enterprise company. You fight by winning customers. That's where the battleground is at. It isn't about making your employees happy. It isn't about having a balanced lifestyle. It isn't about having free beer on Friday. And it isn't about how much money you raised on this last Series A or your seed round. That's my fault. Excuse me. Star Wars, one of our partners ran LucasArts, so that's this Jim giving me a call. All right. After you start winning your customers, whether you figure out what's winning, what's losing. Losing is just as important as winning in the early days, right? Because losing gives you information and data. You just got to collect it so you can adjust. You get to a point where you start winning enough customers that you start dominating the battle space you pick. And those are like vertical markets, sectors, regions, right? So you think about it. You're a new enterprise company. Do I go after the government? Do I go after financial services? Do I go after pharma? You pick a single fight. You go through each one of those customers that drive that marketplace, and you pick them off one at a time until you get to critical mass. Don't jump into another market until you start dominating a market, or you realize there's no way to win and you have to pivot, right? Continue to add resources until you win that market, or until you realize it's unwinnable, and then go somewhere else. Then do number 9. Find the next battleground. And you keep repeating that loop until somebody takes notice. How do you know if somebody's taking notice? Usually it's because one of those big multi-billion-dollar companies gives you a call and says, hey, come on down. I want you to meet our CEO. You know, it's like Larry and Sergey wants to have coffee with you. And the next thing you know, they're pitching whether or not you should sell your company to them. And that's a good problem to have. Okay. Now, if you decide to go down the track of not selling to one of those guys, and you want to go IPO, like a company like our favorite social network company out there, what you have to then do is decide what's your next war you're going to fight. An IPO is just an opportunity to bone up on more resources to fight the next war. And then you just start this loop all over again. And great companies can go through this generation after generation after generation. Here are some measurements and feedback loop systems that allow you to put OODA into practice. First thing is benchmark yourself. Benchmark your time. Time is the most critical problem you have in a startup because it's a race, particularly after you launch. Once you launch, the game is up. Everybody knows that you're out there. You just got money, that you're going to be playing in a particular space. And if you're any good, everybody else is going to try to clone you or eliminate you. Usually, one of your other students in here will say, oh, that was a great idea. I can do a better job. I'm going to clone it. Or those guys on the East Coast at Harvard, MIT, says, oh, those guys at Stanford, I can do it, right? That's why you always get these sector plays where suddenly, out of nowhere, there's 5 or 6 startups playing in the same space. And then eventually, the big guys take a notice. So time is your enemy. This is a race. You got to use your resources appropriately. You got to understand your goals and objectives. I already talked about observing your customers, tracking your competition, understand your range of moves. This is a real important point. Most people do not know what their options are in front of them. They're making decisions that don't have effect because they don't understand what are the alternatives. So if I was to program a chess program, I would look at my chessboard and say, what are all my legal moves? I'm going to eliminate my stupid moves, and I'm going to focus in on the moves that, A, number one, strategically surprise or tactically surprise my opponent. In the absence of my ability to surprise my opponent, what I'm going to do is take the most rational course of action. So let me draw this out for you. Okay, this is probability. And this is impact. It's really expected impact because you don't have a perfect crystal ball. Big companies, this is high. This is low. This is low. This is high. Okay, rational companies. Big companies are rational companies. Entrenched competitors are rational companies. Rational companies play in this area, this regime. They go for high probability decisions. Yeah. I want to make a good decision. Nobody wants to look like a stupid decision. And I want to have high impact. Okay? The thing you need to understand is in most big corporations, the person who's making the decision is a career person, not an entrepreneur. The people who are making decisions avoid risky behavior. Risky behavior is a quick way to end your career. So what do you do as an entrepreneur? An entrepreneur is a little bit like a corporate terrorist. You operate in this area, right? Which is basically low probability, expectable perceived probability with high impact. Why do you operate down here? A, it's because all these guys ignored the space down here, right? Now, you might make a lot of little decisions that have no effect. But if you're a startup, there's nothing really to lose. You don't have anything to begin with. Your reputation's not on the line. And even if you lose money, you're losing venture capital money. It's not even your own money. It's my money. But if you strike it down here, it totally disrupts the game, right? Planes going into the Twin Towers was a high-impact, low-probability of success event that changed the world. Google, the guys who walked in with their sandals without a PowerPoint presentation to raise money, was a low probability of success. Steve Jobs, Mr. 2.65 high school GPA, was a low probability of success at the point in time when you showed up in the market space. Okay. Let's talk about which details don't matter in the very beginning. Now, this is in the very beginning. Business plans generally do not matter. Vision matters more than business plans in the beginning. Most of the time, whatever you write down in that actual handout, on your PowerPoint, on your presentations, it will be wrong. Even the markets you think you're going to actually win in and play in typically are wrong. It's always fun to look at everybody's initial business plans of multi-billion-dollar companies. They were generally wrong. The vision was right, but the actual strategies necessary to win, while directionally may be correct, in details were not precise. Business models and financials. Think about it. What was YouTube's business model? What was Twitter's business model? Amazon had this business model. I remember those articles that said, Amazon just made $1 billion in sales and still can't make money. I know, here's our business model at Amazon when they got started. Let's buy things and sell it for cheaper than we buy it. Right? It, at that point, was totally irrational. Twitter had a totally irrational, if any, business model. They might be still trying to search for the business model, yet they create huge value. The work environment. The number of times I spend going into a company who just got funded in their Series A round that has the nice chairs, the beautiful office, right? Just drives me crazy. Venture brands and capital. So let's kind of just quickly going on. Best plans are directionally correct. So if it's just directionally correct, you probably could write it in an executive summary, 2 pages or less. Strategy counts more than minutia, right? Think broad, think how am I going to win? What are my resources that are in front of me? Don't detail plan. Remember, you got to use agility and adjustment. Smartly develop your business model. And just a little point, all presentations look like this. Here's my business plan. I do a PowerPoint. And here's my revenues. My user adoption. My size of business. My market cap valuation. They all look the same. And trust us. Anybody in the venture capital business who has to go through 300 presentations over a period of a year, every presentation begins to look exactly the same. There's a general rule that most venture capitalists have. The slicker the presentation, the suckier the business. Focus on demand, not monetization. In the beginning, it's about building critical mass. I don't really care if you have a very extremely profitable business or great gross margins if you're selling it to 3 kids down the street. It's irrelevant. It's what happens at scale. The first question is, can you even get to scale? Getting to scale is more important than monetization, profitability, right, or financial models in the beginning. Later on, making money becomes extremely important, but not in the beginning. Don't focus on profits, focus on burn, right? Don't focus on margins, focus on scale. And always worry about the board or the advisor or the executive who likes to stare at spreadsheets. This is totally true. The performance of a startup is inversely related to the quality of its office, right? The kinds of offices we love to see is 2 file cabinets with a door on top, right? Think about the Skunk Works, the place that built the SR-71, the F-104, right? Everybody at Lockheed had fancy offices. That team worked out of a warehouse. Startups are driven by the mission, not by the conveniences and beauty of the environment they work in. In fact, even the people in many cases, are adversarial with each other in the greatest companies. Why? Because everybody who works at the company believes that they can do as good of a job as the CEO. Think about it. Winning teams, right? Winning teams usually have a bunch of stars in it who fundamentally don't like each other. It's not always the case, but there's a lot of friction. But out of that friction comes the desire to win and individuals pushing each other for the victory condition. Venture brands are important in one respect. They're clues on where to get lots of money. And they're also clues on where the best partners are at any moment in time. But I just want to point out a couple key things you should do. Buy partners, not associates. Hey, if you can get Jim Breyer at Excel, right? If you can get John Doerr at KP, right? Go for it. Those guys are great. They're terrific. But don't fall in love with a brand and end up with an associate. Most venture funds profits are driven usually by one or two partners. Understand who you are bringing on your team. Venture capital raising money is not about raising money. Everybody thinks it's about, I need money. What it is about getting advice, experience, and insight, particularly in your Series A. So I don't really care if you raise $15 million on a great valuation if you don't get the right person on your team who's going to help you build your business. Okay, some tips on capital. Raise only what you need. Too much cash makes you fat and dumb. I like lean and mean startups. I like companies who raise only what they need. Vinod Khosla was my VC at Kleiner. He always told me, whatever you need, only raise half of it. Right? It keeps you hungry. You get to own more of your company at the end. And more importantly, it makes your VCs even more hungrier to come back for more later. There's a saying, no pain, no gain. There's nothing like desperation to drive innovation. The best decisions in most companies happen at the point where they're almost out of money. When they're sitting on top of a lot of cash, they do a lot of different things. They chase a lot of different beasts out there trying to go after it, and there's no focus. There's nothing like going out of business or the threat of going out of business or being personally bankrupt that focuses your attention on what you need to succeed. And the last point is the most important one. Capital finds great entrepreneurs and ideas. So the whole idea of let's raise so I don't have to deal with this, let's raise a whole chunk of money so I don't have to deal with it for the next 3 years. Look, if you have a great idea and you're executing on your great idea, VCs are standing in line because the reality is, even though there are a ton of deals out there, you can count on the digits of your hands the number of deals out there that are really, really great. And everybody's chasing those deals, right? So you don't have to worry about it if you actually begin to execute and you believe in yourself. Even worse is once you take a lot of money and you're not performing, that's don't want to touch that one. Okay, which details really matter? Let's start with vision. All of these guys, Google, Apple, Starbucks, FedEx, Facebook, right? Amazon, they all have one thing in common. They had these visions of changing the world. They went into business to either change the world or do something that they fundamentally love to do. They didn't do it to, let's go make lots of money. So like, I got an idea. I got to make a lot of money, so I think I'll sell coffee. Right? He had a vision of creating a place that people can go and escape the drudgeries of life and be special. Jobs. Everybody thinks of Jobs today, but he was a total prick when he started Apple, right? But his vision was so powerful that everybody decided to work for the prick. He had the worst hours. I mean, they used to walk around with buttons that says working 100 hours and proud of it, right? And everybody in the Apple II division, right, would say those guys are just nuts. They were also the lowest paid engineers at Apple who worked on the Mac, right? But his vision of changing the world was so powerful, and he did it successfully time and time again, right? Can I put the internet onto a laptop? Talk about a dumb idea, right? But that led to the search engine, right? I'm going to create the biggest bookstore ever and don't have to worry about making any money, right? I'm at Harvard and I want to hook up a bunch of schools and, you know, I'm going to make a product and basically build a business around people who actually don't spend any money and steal, right? Or how about this guy at FedEx? I'm going to take on UPS and the US Postal Office. And by the way, the little known story is when he was like out of money and couldn't make the next payroll, they actually went to Las Vegas and bet all the money on a particular color to make the next business. I mean, desperation drives innovation. Okay, let's talk about details that do matter. Most important set of details that I really advise startups to really work on is their product and service. You take a look at Apple, the history of Apple. The Apple II, the iPod, the iPhone, and iPad. Each one of these companies' products at the time of introduction had other competitors, bigger competitors, better resource competitors. Their products had more features generally and were first to market. Yet Apple won. Why? Because Steve would go up and say, you know, I don't like this curve. It doesn't look right. You know, Tony Fadell, who led the iPhone and iPad group, right, went to Steve Jobs and said, you know, I can actually put a pen, a stylus on this to make it work like the Windows or the Trio. And Jobs says, you are not going to turn on that function, right? We are not putting a pen. Turns out that elegance and simplicity almost always trumps features and complexity, right? Bad product design is when you don't have the thing working quite right and you add a new feature, right? You look like one of those tuner cars driving down the street with those spinning hubcaps, all right? It doesn't make your car go faster. You know, you go into a Lamborghini and it's bare on the inside. Yet that's the car I'd rather drive. When you have to add features, when you have to add complexity, your probability of adoption goes straight down. The simpler the idea, the simpler the use case, the more elegant the solution, the higher the probability for adoption. Strategic positioning, clearly. Either you're going to define a new market or you're going to destroy the old ones. This whole creative destruction process. The biggest mistake is trying to evolve or improve an existing market. You cannot outgun these guys through a series of evolutionary steps by saying, you know what? My product is 10 microseconds faster than the existing competitors. Switching costs are too high. So you either have to revolutionize by removing them, eliminating the business, judoing them against their strengths, or you're going to have to create a new market that didn't exist before. Anything in the middle, pick a new business plan. Okay, people. We all heard this thing about hiring only the A players. You know how many startups there are here in Silicon Valley? The battle for engineering, marketing, and sales talents, it's unbelievable. Everybody's looking for the A talent, right? The reality is, if you can get A talent, great. But in this environment, you're going to have to grow them. The people you need to be really afraid of are the experienced B players. These are the players who have not been successful in company after company other than keeping a job and roam from company to company to company. They are great at making sure that any aspiring C player who's inexperienced growing into an A player waits their turn. They're excellent at defending their turf. They have the best reasons why they can't make their ship dates. All plausible. But they're not bad enough to fire. You can't fire them. And you think they're actually getting the job done, so you never replace them. I'd rather have an empty slot than a B player. I'd rather take a kid out of San Francisco State and take a risk that there's a reasonable probability, even a small probability, that that person may turn into an A player, than getting a guaranteed B player who will always be a B player and make my company a B company, and no way am I going to win that fight. B players. Run, shoot them, get rid of them, right? If you see a resume that has a long list of experience by the 32 companies she's been at, and every one of them gives you reasonable recommendations and reviews, avoid them like the plague. Unfair advantage or viral adoption and distribution, right? You got to get out there. So you have to have some way, either because of the addictive nature, whatever way you can do to get that adoption curve up, or partnering and having some unfair advantage that blocks your competitors, that gives you an opening. Without this, it's almost impossible to get out there, particularly in a crowded space. This is my favorite Bill Colemanism, which is know which customers to avoid, ignore, or fire. Bad customers suck up all your time. They suck up all your resources, right? They never pay you for anything. They always just want just one more thing, right? And they deny you the ability to make a profit. Or the deal, it's just this around the next corner, right? Or yeah, we're going to get it out of the labs, right? As soon as I get some budget. And you continue to sink more and more resources into bad customers. So the most important thing you have to learn about sales is knowing which customers to go after, which ones to avoid, and which ones to shoot, right? The whole thing, the customer is always right, that's just a tagline by a bunch of disgruntled customers, usually the noisy ones, who nobody actually really makes any money off anyway. Okay, defensible positions. Let's just quickly go through layers of protection. Look, getting a startup going, how do you keep going, and how do you protect yourselves? Most important thing you have to do is build loyalty. Loyalty to you as the entrepreneur, loyalty to the team, loyalty to the product, but the most important thing is loyalty to the vision of the company. Nothing is more important to making that vision a reality. If you can stake that vision out there and get everybody loyal to it, including your customers. I mean, just think about Apple, right? Apple customers are fanatics. I get this great story. I'm on this nonprofit board. It's called Great Schools, right? It's been around for a while, rates all the schools. So the CEO of that company went up to Steve Jobs' wife. Steve's wife does all of the kind of charitable donations. She does the screening for that, makes all the decisions. Walked in with a Windows machine. That meeting lasts. It was gone. You were out of there, right? Because the loyalty to the brand, it wasn't the Steve. You do that with, the worst thing you could possibly do is put Windows on that beautiful, shining Mac over there, right? It's fanatical. If you can drive that, and it's fanatical because the vision is so powerful. Brand, right? Brand is important, particularly in the early days. Brands need to be aspirational. It needs to create a desire among your employees that the brand itself, just by looking at it, tells me why I am here. The brand drives behavior of your customers, right? Why I buy. The stronger the brand, the more loyal to the brand, the harder the switching costs, and how you begin to win that fight to get more and more market share. Science and technology does matter. Why? Because if it takes you 10 minutes to create a piece of technology, it takes your competitors 10 minutes to create the technology. The tougher the technology underneath, the real meat and science. Now think about Google, right? Where do they think, what area do they put all their guards around? Those server rooms. Not because of the data, because of the tech. That is their crown jewels about how they do and how they process that stuff. Amazon, their customer list, right? And their ability to actually mine that. So the real science is important. And of course, these days, patent protection is really, really critical, particularly given the new patent rules. I won't go into it too much, but to say that patents drive value, particularly if it gets in the way of these guys' ability to attack you, but more importantly, to attack their peer competitors. Why would else would anybody buy Palm? You think about these, who would want to buy Motorola? Do you think Google want to buy Motorola for cell phones? Right? It's the patent suite to be able to battle against Apple or trade against Apple. Okay. Exit strategies. Two ways. Make a lot of money, make billions of dollars, be Apple and you don't have to worry about exit strategy because that's great. But the other strategy is, as I say, turn your company into a sharp knife. Find a street fight, typically with 2 or more, preferably 3 big multi-billion-dollar bullies who are all afraid of each other, and throw yourself in the middle of the fight. What happens is companies do preemptive strikes on little companies, not because they're afraid of little companies, because they're afraid their competitors is going to buy that little company, right? And then you get these irrational valuations. So either strike it big, or turn yourself into a weapon of destruction. Very quick conventional wisdoms. We kind of talk about this. Focus, focus, focus. Focusing to early limits, future opportunities. You know, I heard this all the time. Sometimes, you know, VC says, my job is to reduce risk. No, your VC's job is to increase opportunities, right? Opportunities means smart risk taking. Anybody who tries to reduce risk turns you out of this space and puts you into this space, and you're just going to lose the fight. Your decisions is about placing bets, your product decisions, your roadmaps. You have to place enough strategic bets to give you a reasonable shot at success. Remember, we're betting on your ability to lead through the challenges. Which gets us to the next point, which is, I always hear this other one, this is the bet on the jockey, not on the horse kind of thing. You know, the bet on the entrepreneur, not on the technology. Well, their answer is, that's kind of stupid. You really need to do both, right? I mean, you can have the greatest race car driver in the world and give that race car driver, you know, a Yugo, and they're not going to win the race, right? You can put myself into an F1 racing car, I'm going to crash and burn, right? It is the best jockey and the best horse. So when you do a startup, you better have an idea of what that horse you were building and turn it into a racing monster, and you better learn how to drive. Never raise enough money? Just remember, that's my line to you to convince you to sell me as much as your company as you possibly can for the lowest possible price. Look, I got to make money as a venture capitalist, right? So if I can't make money, I'm not going to invest in you, so you have to be rational and reasonable. The typical numbers that people don't want to talk about is, I kind of need to own around 20% of your company, maybe 25 because I get diluted down, right? But if you're selling more than that because it's convenient for you, you better think again. Plus, remember I said earlier, raising too much money makes you fat, dumb, and happy, and out of business. Concentrate on the financial numbers. No, those are not the right. You got to concentrate on numbers, usually not the financials in the beginning. It's really about the metrics of success, and we're going to have that in your work project. Okay, here's my favorite line among unsuccessful venture capitalists. Be realistic, right? Those numbers don't look real. That business plan is too ambitious, right? You're just not smart enough. You can't displace your competitors. Steve Jobs had this magical ability of creating the reality distortion field. He can distort reality and make people buy into this vision that was wholly unrealistic, wholly imaginative, but was smart enough to put together a team and drive a plan and strategy in a way that allowed him to dominate. Here's a story. Steve Jobs went up to the ranch back in the 90s and watched Star Wars on Lucas's private screen. It was an emotional experience for Steve. He thought it'd be really great to have that, to be able to do that for everybody, right? So he went back and he thought about it. He challenged his team, how do we do that? And he said, well, you know, we can't do that elegantly because the technology isn't ready, right? But I love that picture. I love it. Can we reproduce that picture? What can we do at a consumer level? Can we reproduce that picture at that level of resolution? He said, about like that. So guess what they started to work on? The iPhone. Started with the screen. Then he said, okay, I wanted to be bigger. Can we still do this? Everybody said no. Tony said, we can do it about like this at that high resolution. Out pops the iPad. Now Steve is gone. And it has all of his disciples still with wanting to do that. Right? Guess what he's going to do next? We'll see. Okay. Hire only A players? Okay. Here's the problem with A players. They cost a lot. If you guys don't understand baseball, this is Zito. This is Timmy. Right? Sometimes they help you, but they're not particularly loyal. They come in and they come out. You pay a lot of money. Right? And sometimes they're just a bust. If you have a great farm system, the ability to build great employees from nothing, you win. You take any kid off the street who has passion and wants to be successful and turn him into a star, you win. Great startups create great farm systems. It isn't about free agency. You can wait. I mean, the number one complaint I always have is, oh, my employees, I just don't have good enough employees. That's why we couldn't make our numbers this week. No, you suck as a leader. All right, final thoughts. Spend as much time picking your partners as you would your spouse. You're going to start a company. Let's not take the random person sitting next to you in your class, right? When you're going to pick a venture capitalist, right? Spend more than 30 seconds at a partners meeting talking to that and get jaded by some magical set large numbers that are putting in front of you. Look, whether it is your partners in business or your partners as venture capitalists, you're going to be married to them for a long period of time. In doing a startup, there is nothing else that's going to happen in your life, right? Your spouse is going to hate you if you have one, right? You're not going to see your kids. You're not going to have balance in your life because you're playing to win. That means every minute of the day with every ounce of energy to win. Otherwise, you're not playing in the game. If you want a balanced life, work for a successful company. If you want to do a startup, you better invest in the people you surround yourself with and pick them carefully. The cost, there's a dirty secret in Silicon Valley with B players. The best B players, my favorite B players, are the guys who have become experts at getting paid more to leave a company than to join them. Time and time again. There are these individuals out there that get put into companies on these big packages and they always get fired for bigger packages, right? That's because initially they didn't pick the partners appropriately. Products rule. Vision is more important than products. Products are more important than anything other than vision and everything else. If your team is not out to make the best service or product, nothing else matters. Attack your competitors at their strength. How many times have you heard, oh, wow, I can go on and take on Google or Apple or Microsoft because they have this one flaw in their product? And I solved that flaw. No. The only way you can take on those companies or take on even a startup is you better be able to tackle them at their best and still win. You've got to go after their strengths. Never underestimate your competition. Big mistake is, I'm better than that established competitor right now. Actually, what most entrepreneurs come in and pitch is, my idea is better than their product is right now, right? But 2 years from now, that might not be the case. Good case study to study, Saturn versus Honda. GM had a better plan for a car than Honda had with the Accord. The only problem, it took 8 years for the Saturn to come out. And Honda had 3 generations of Accord, made money all along the way, and that 3rd generation Accord was better than that 1st generation Saturn. Push yourself to your failure point. Look, amateurs keep trying until they get it right. Professionals keep pushing themselves until they fail, right? You just got to make sure your failures are not catastrophic. So you got to keep pushing, and you got to keep testing, and never be satisfied. So, answer to the pop quiz is F, not D. None of the above. All these are really important, but usually not at a startup. Okay, so quickly, the challenge question. Okay, I'm going to give you a real case, and you guys are going to help me get to the right answer. Okay, here's my problem. I got this company. It is in the smart TV space. It's doing content for smart TV. It's a company called Redux. You can, if you're on Google TV or on, if you're on your computers, it won't work on an iPad. Well, it might, no, it won't work on an iPad. You can bring it up. So what they do is they take short form video, they crowdsource those short form videos, organize them in channels, and allows you to watch it continuously in a lean back mode. So I can turn on autos, switch into autos, and watch endless short form videos that's been crowdsourced about cars, about fashion, about music, and a bunch of other categories. Okay. So this startup, Berkeley guys, not as smart as yours, you guys, Berkeley guys, who all dropped out to start this company. Google has put them on their permanent page on Google TV, and now they're getting as much traffic as any other embedded application, more traffic than Pandora, and so it's a permanent place on their channel. They have, they're making no money, zero revenues. Actually, that's not, I think they made $2,000 in revenue last year. Average viewing time, longest average viewing time of viewers, typically an hour a session compared to YouTube, which is like 10, 15 minutes, right? And they just came to us to bridge them to the next round of financing. All right. So I got one question, but there are three parts. What metric should that CEO use to convince his funder that I should give him more money? And it has to be something that can be accomplished in the next year. What's the one number, not four numbers, the one number that's going to get me to give that team money to continue to survive? Part B, what number do they have to continue to perform for Google to keep them on the front page of Google TV? Right? Third part of the question. What number does the CEO has to internally use to measure whether or not he should throw in the towel or keep going? Okay, so that's the challenge question.
For more, please visit us at stanford.edu.